Good morning, friends. Hello. How are you this morning? Good morning. Hey, Kristen. Good morning to you. Robin. Hey, how are you? Man, I you made me all weepy with that post you tagged me in there, taking that and the picture. If you don't know, Robin posted a picture of our graduation 23 years ago today, and yeah, man, got me right in the feels. Hey, John. Good morning to you. Glad you're here. How are you, friends? Hope you're doing well. Back for another week as we are. Jane, good morning to you. John, good morning. Hope you're both doing well. That I got your brochure here about all the we've got to have you down to for some music this summer. I hope um, it would be terrific. So we'll figure that out. Hey, good morning, Yvette. How are you? Welcome, everybody. Hope you're having a good morning. Got a couple more people coming along, and we'll get going along. Oh, little coffee from the lobster mug this morning. Liking it. Good morning. All right, friends. Good morning to you. It is the 23rd day of May on this 11/11, and I am glad that you're here. I'm so a joy to see your little digital faces when you show up, or if you're catching this later and you're a part of the wider journey of being a part of this, welcome. I hope this is a beautiful and wonderful day for you, and that truly there's some grace in it, you know. So I want to start today just by telling a story, and it's the story of John Alexander Castro. And you always know it's a good story when somebody has three names. You ever notice that? It's like, they're either like a serial killer or a bank robber or something. Well, in this case, it's actually a bank robber. John Alexander Castro was, could we just call him Johnny Castro? We can't do that. What is it about the way we organize things? It's something about like the gravitas of what they've done with those three names. Anyway, I digress. Where that this in back in the 80s, he worked for an armored car company, and he's responsible for one of the more interesting what are known as inside jobs. That he didn't smash and grab the money. He didn't like a scene out of the movie Heat or anything, like blow up the car and take all the cash. No, he simply got a job working for the armored car company. And in the middle of the time while he was working for the armored car company, his partner needed to leave early for work. So he said, "Ah, no problem. I'll cover the rest of the shift." And so his partner left, and then he helped himself to about $1 million cash and left the facility. He left a note, and he left his sidearm there, and he actually thanked the company for the money. So it wasn't a big mystery who had done it. He fled from there to from Louisiana to Minnesota, and he lived there. He lived quite well in Minnesota, as you might imagine, for a while. And before long, though, that all of his transactions being in cash, he was living large, and he wasn't working, and he had kind of the story, but it didn't quite line up. And so, and he had hired this housekeeper who kind of figured out that there was more going on, and so she started to put the screws to him and kind of threaten him with disclosure if he didn't kind of increase her wage from just a housekeeper to extortionist, I think is what we call it. And then after about a year and a half, things finally unraveled, and he was caught by the FBI, and but they never found the money. And when he was asked, he said, He simply stated that, being a fugitive is very expensive, and he spent all the money. And so he was incarcerated for a number of years and was let out, and to some degree hasn't been seen since. This a notion of an inside job, which are kind of like we I think have to contend with this. The inside jobs that we do to ourselves and that we do to what we carry. You know, Jesus has something to say about this in terms of from the Gospel of Mark. He says it this way, and then he said, "What comes out of a person that defiles him?" Because they're talking about being clean. They're talking about being clean in the ritual sense of making sure that they're acceptable to be received to the temple and to give good worship to God. And he says, and so Jesus is being kind of notorious, eating with the wrong people, eating at the wrong times, working at the wrong times, doing the wrong things, breaking the kosher and Sabbath laws that would allow him to be considered clean. And his response is this. He says, and then he said, "What comes out of a person that defiles him? For from within, out of people's hearts, come evil thoughts, sexual immoralities, thefts, murders, adulteries, greeds, evil actions, deceit, promiscuity, stinginess, blasphemy, pride, and foolishness. All these evil things come from within and defile a person." I think we have to all contend with the fact that we have our own John Alexander Castro on board. We don't like to admit this. I mean, I don't like to admit it. I like to think that I really am doing the best I can, and I'm not saying that we're not doing the best we can, but that I really that my full intentions really are to try and do all that I can do in this. But we're often very unwilling, and particularly to admit to ourselves, that there are elements within our heart, there are elements within our being that totally want to just stuff $1 million in the duffel bag and run. That just want to steal our resources, steal our energy, steal our time, steal our ability to function and just run for it. They just want to rob us of the goodness of our lives. And that we've all got this little John Alexander Castro. And what I love about, and why I wanted to share that story with you in particular about an inside job with you today, is because there's this mischievous quality to it, right? There's this that Castro, you totally can like John Alexander Castro in the midst of that story. He leaves a note to say thank you for the thanks for the money, and he leaves his sidearm behind, kind of demonstrating he's not he's not armed and on the lam. He's just a guy who's going to take some resources from us, or he's not. And then even at the end, and even in some ways he gets away with it. He has gone off into the world, because the great belief from the FBI was that he had hid the money somewhere, and that once he got out of prison, he would go find his stash. But I think the spiritual reality of it is, and I think we kind of sometimes have this relationship with our that would steal from us, right? We kind of have this it's just a quirk of mine that I get mad about things, or it's just a quirk of mine that I really get angry, or it's just a quirk of mine that I have these little impulses that I want to pile up all the cookies in front of me, and it's not a big thing, and it's not to say that it's we're doomed and all going to hell, or we're horrible people, but it is to say to admit between God and ourselves and the world, and just to open ourselves up to the reality of we really do have John Alexander Castro's on board. We really do have an inside job that's stealing from us, that's working from us. Because, and I bring this up today because I think we're so I shared with you earlier that my friend Robin posted, who's here today. I'm so grateful she's here. That you can go to my page in Facebook and see the picture she's that I'm tagged in. But it's our graduation picture from 23 years ago from seminary. And I think about, and it really caused me today to think about the grace in which I've been offered over times, the numerous times I could have gone off of the rails in ministry. I wanting the wrong things, suggesting the wrong things, doing the wrong things, and the way that grace and the way that, or even just, and not even being able to help myself sometimes, of truly just being betrayed by my heart or being betrayed by my mind and truly not being able to get it right in moments. And yet the grace upon grace that would come in and make things that seemed completely wrong right, or help or keep me from truly going not just into the ditch, because we all end up in the ditch, but going off the bridge where we can never get back. And so this long journey, and this continues thing of grace. But what kind of dawned on me in the midst of all of that is it's always been an inside job. It was rarely that there were people outside of me or there were influences outside of me plotting for my destruction, but it was always my little John Alexander Castro in there trying to just trying to stuff something in a duffel bag and run for the door, and so that I might so that I might feel special about myself, or I might not have to face a reality in which I find myself. All manner of things, and it comes in all forms. It's not it's not always braggadocio. Sometimes it is the swamp, and it was despair. But in all of the different ways that this journey has come, it's so apparent to me that what has been the core of my salvation in some ways is the ability to receive that grace, the ability to let God keep me out of keep me off the bridge, to let grace work in my life, knowing I don't deserve it, knowing that it is an inside job, that it is my little inner John Alexander Castro. It was me, when you're in the game of Clue and you're trying to figure out who the murderer is. It was me the whole time. That there, and not obviously all of me, but these these little hellish parts that dwell, these little selfish parts, these little difficult parts that live within us, that are always trying to just stuff the best of us into a duffel bag and run off with it, rather than letting God do God's work with it. It really comes down to a great thought that came by Father Stephen Andrew Damick, who he just in a random post, but it was just such a brilliant thought, where he said, there really is no neutral. There really is no neutral idea around our engagement with God. That either we are either being drawn towards God and doing what God is inviting us into, or inviting us into grace, inviting us into love, and we're standing our watch over the gifts and the treasures that God has given us, and we're taking them where they should go, kind of as a good kind of in kind of guarding our own armored car and delivering our own resources to the places that God would have them, or we're in rebellion, or we're working against it, or we're stealing from the treasury of the Most High. That there really isn't any, just standing on the sidewalk smoking a cigarette and letting things go, because if we're not in the response to grace, the grace of wonder and beauty, and also the grace that holds us to account and that brings us back, and that says no, no, not that way, this way, dummy. That the grace that rescues us again and again and again in all of it. That there is no, we like to think we can just sit down and relax, and that in that there is this way in which we're just not doing any damage. And that the thing is that's not really true, because God has desires for us that are beyond our own. God has life, and life in abundance in store for us. And that when we're letting our own bank robbers, letting our own John Alexander Castros run around, or even when we're just not standing our post and not guarding our treasures and not taking them where God has appointed them to go, we really are in rebellion. And that it's always, almost always an inside job. So, and I don't offer you great solutions in that today, other than the grace of God, other than the fact that nothing will separate you from that grace, and that grace can be relied on again and again and again to foil your own little robbers and to foil your own little bank robbers. All that is required of us is to stay in relationship with the one who made us, to keep looking towards the face of Christ, to keep turning our hearts towards the goodness as best as we can figure it out, and the truth of what is the best we can figure it out, knowing that there are betrayers within us, knowing that there is a Judas that sits at our table, and loving it anyway. Always the great lesson of Maundy Thursday, of Holy Thursday, is that Judas ate too. Friends, I hope you can hear this not as an invitation to beat yourself up, but as an invitation to love yourself powerfully, even the John Alexander Castros of your day, and understanding that the troubles and the betrayals and the difficulties of the world aren't coming from out there, but they're coming from in here. And that when we own that, when we truly put it all before God, God's grace stops being cheap, and stops being like Bonhoeffer would say, stop being like just this intellectual thing where we can say, oh yeah, God loves you, but it starts being rich and expensive and salvific, where it truly comes in and arrests those things, stops those things that would destroy us, and holds us in joy and peace and love back to the place of abundance and goodness in life that God has for us. That's the invitation of what it is, of just acknowledging our own inside job. It's not for us to be filled with shame. It is for us to truly be vessels of God's love in this world. And that to not have the preciousness which is poured into us squandered and thrown away and lost. Because, life on the lam, life as a fugitive is expensive. It's painful. It's hard. Come home. Turn yourself in. Let the one who loves you love you home and bring you grace and goodness and peace in these days. All right, friends, that's my hope for you today. Peace and grace to you all on this high day, and I hope you have a wondrous and beautiful day. We'll pick it up tomorrow with another 11:11.